Watching One Piece gameplay is one of the best ways to improve, but for new players, it can be hard to keep up, as we don't always go into detail about what abilities are happening or why the player is making a certain choice. And while knowing your Dawn curve is important, there's a big difference in what we plan to happen and what actually does. And so today, I'm going to break down one of my Shanks games, going over what I'm thinking each turn, what my opponent's trying to do, and explaining each ability as it goes off. Here's the deck I'll be playing with, and if you want to learn about each card here, I cover that in another video, and I'll include the timestamp and link in the description. But the leader itself doesn't matter today. I'm focusing on core One Piece concepts that will be applicable no matter what leader you choose. I chose Shanks because I like him. Our first game is against a Doflamingo player, and there's two questions that we want to answer right away. The first is, do we want to go first or second? This was taken away as it's random, so he got the choice to choose. But if we did have the choice, what would we want to do? For new players, just figure out what your deck likes to do. And if you're unsure, just go first. As you gain some experience, you'll realize that there's a mix of what you like to do as well as what you want to take away from your opponent. And against a Doflamingo, you always want to take the first turn away from them if you can. This is because their leader ability costs 3 Dawn, so they can attach 2, swing 7k, and then bring out a 4-cost Warlords card. But he chose to go first, nothing we can do. So what we're focused on is should we mulligan? For new players, you're looking for the best cards in your deck, and you're hoping to have something to play each turn. For experienced players, we're looking for specific cards that we know will help us in the matchup. And against a Doflamingo player, these are the cards that I'm looking to have in my hand. Of course, I don't need all of them, but more I'm looking for one of these to play on my 6 Dawn, 8 Dawn, and 10 Dawn turn. But don't expect to start the game with a perfect hand. You're just looking for most of the pieces that you would like to see, and you'll kind of figure the rest out as you go. A key card I'm missing is Yasop, which we love to play on our 5 Dawn turn. But I have a Searcher card, so I'm hoping that I can play that, find him, and my hand will be complete. To start the game, Dofi plays a Perona, which allows him to look at the top 5 cards of his deck and arrange it in any order. This is a common Dofi play, and means next turn he'll be summoning out a 4-cost Warlords card of his choice. You can't attack on your first turn, so now it's mine. And I knew the first thing I wanted to do was try and find Yasop, so I play my 1-cost Searcher and see if I can. Which I do. Sometimes taking a risk pays off. With 1 Dawn remaining, I could play Building Snake, and there's 2 things I want to think about. The first is the card that comes out with the leader ability is Rested, which means giving it minus 3000 power is a sure way to KO it early on. But he's also 1 cost, the easiest number to remove from the game, and if my opponent has any type of removal, he's gone. But with my knowledge of Dofi players, I know all they have is Trafalgar Law, so worst case scenario, he just goes back to my hand. So I play him as well and end my turn. And the way Dofi's leader ability works, he attaches 2 Dawn to himself, and then he has to rest 1 active Dawn in order to activate his leader ability, which he reveals the top card, and it comes down because it's a Warlords card. You'll also notice that even though we both have when attacking abilities, his went off first. And the reason for this is if there are 2 abilities that should go off at the same time, whosever turn it is, that ability goes off first. Which is a little confusing because Shanks' ability only goes off on your opponent's turn, but still, the principle is there. Whosever turn it is, that ability goes off first. And you'll notice I could use my leader ability to bring him down to 6000 power, and then use a 2k counter in my hand to come up to 7000 power and stay at full life. But I don't want to do this, and in general, if you're at full life and they swing towards you, you just want to take the hit and add that card to your hand. We could spend a lot of time talking about this, but the general principle is adding a card to your hand and keeping all your counters is a lot more valuable in the early game than discarding a card from your hand and staying at 5 life. 4 life versus 5 life isn't a big difference, but keeping a 2k counter and using it in the next few turns to keep one of your characters alive could make a big difference in the flow of the game. So we take the hit, actually add another Building Snake to our hand, and now it's our turn. And I'm pausing the video again, but I want to go over 2 of the most important topics in the One Piece card game. If you learn nothing else from this video, please just pay attention to the next 2 things I say. To start, understand that One Piece is a battle of resources, not just a battle of life. You're competing against your opponent with the cards in your hand, the cards on the field, and of course, your life matters too. You don't want it to drop to 0. And your primary goal is to break down your opponent's resources, removing cards from their hand and the field while also chipping away at their life. This leads into the second point, which is always go for board control before going for life. This ties back into the first rule, as they're either going to need to counter out and discard a card from their hand, or we're going to KO that character and they lose a card on the field. Alternatively, if we went for life, they're adding a card to their hand, and not only that, but that same character can attack us again next turn. Now, characters won't always be rested, and sometimes you'll have no option but to attack the leader, which you still want to do, but if you have the choice, you know what to prioritize. And like any good rule, I have to talk about the exception, which is if there's a really large power difference between yours and your opponent's character. As an example, let's say I just attacked with the Shanks and my opponent had the following cards on the field. To even threaten this card, they would need to attach all of their Dawn to 1 character and attack him, and even then, it might not KO him. The better option would be to go after this 5k power leader, as each of these cards with 1 to 2 Dawn invested could threaten a life. Now back to the game. I'm focused on board removal, and I figured I don't need to use my Snake right now because it's only a 5k and he's not that powerful. I'm just going to attach my Dawn and get rid of him. Now, even in hindsight, 4 attaching was pretty overkill. I could have just swung with 7k and then played another building snake. Another thing for you to note is 2k over whatever you're attacking is generally the magic number, as this means if your opponent wants to deflect, they need to discard 2 cards, a 2k counter and another counter in order to deflect it. And discarding 2 cards to save 1 is generally not the best play, especially in early turns, so if they do that, it's a great move for you. Our opponent then plays a 1-cost searcher and is able to find a Jinbei and add him to his hand. In my opinion, the next best play would be to play that Jinbei and chain out another Warlord's card, but he instead goes the Martial Deteach route. This card allows him to add 1 card to the top of his deck and then give 2 Rested Dawn to his leader. So he still brings out Jinbei, but now he's rested instead of active. And as I mentioned before, probably on your 5, 4, and 3 life, if you're swung with 7k or higher, it's better to just let it go and keep the cards in your hand. So while I could use this counter card along with my leader ability, I choose not to. And I still activate my leader ability. This isn't doing anything, it just made me feel better. And for those of you not familiar, Jinbei is at the core of the Dofi deck, as on play, he allows you to summon out another Warlord's card. And the card he brings out is Boa Hancock, a 6k power blocker. With the on-play effect, he can look at the top 3 cards of his deck, arrange them in any order, and then the leader or character gains 1 Rested Dawn. And this ties into what I was talking about before about One Piece being a battle of resources. So while he has 5 characters to my 2, and all 5 life to my 3, I have 9 cards in my hand, and he only has 3. Let's see how this plays out. I follow my Dawn Curve strategy and play out Yasop, granting my leader plus 1000 power until the end of my opponent's next turn. I now have 1 Dawn remaining, and I could either attach it to my leader and swing for 7k, or play out another Building Snake. I decided I didn't want to reveal to my opponent that I have another one, so instead I attached to leader and swing at Jinbei. But if he wanted to, he could block with Boa and use a 2k counter to stay alive. To stop this, I decreased her power with Building Snake, which means if he wants to keep either one of them alive, he's going to need to discard 2 cards, bringing him down to 1. Which he does, and I couldn't believe this. With 9 cards in my hand, I was thinking the card advantage is just too strong. This is another rule against Doflamingo players, a rule I broke here, which is always try to stick to 6 to 7 cards. And here's why. With 1 Charlotte Pudding, he removed 4 cards from my hand. And now his 2 card discarding made sense. While generally it's not the best idea, he wanted to maintain his board advantage and then wipe out my hand advantage in the next turn. And sure, I have 5 cards to his 1, but he has 5 life to my 3, as well as 5 characters to my 2. Which means in terms of total resources, we're just about even. Our saving grace is we still have a Ben Beckman for next turn, as if we had no 7 to 8 cost character, we'd be in a real pickle. And he still has 3 Dawn left to attack with. He starts with Jinbei, swinging 6k, and luckily we can use our leader ability to cancel this out and avoid a hit. At exactly 6k, I can stop this with a 1k counter, which I'm going to choose to do, as I know he can swing 7k with leader after this, and I can't stop that, and I really don't want to go down to 1 life. I also can't discard Beckman as a counter, since he's currently my best play for next turn. So we take this hit, add a Silver Israeli to our hand, and a Newgate to our draw, so we're now stacked with high power characters, but we don't have any 2k counters in our hand. I'm currently thinking about what's my best option, as I can do a Newgate and give Yasop 1 Dawn, I can play Beckman and just trash Boa instantly, or I could play a Silver Israeli and decrease the power of them both. I was sweating a little bit making this decision, as with no counters in my hand, I knew if I messed up, next turn it could be over. I settle on Silver Israeli, as this will allow me to remove Boa completely and give Jinbei a power decrease. And with only 1 card in his hand, if I swing for 2k power over him, I know that there's no way for him to counter out. So I can give -3 to one, -2 to another, and then trash a 3k power or lower. I almost thought about trashing Martial Deteach, but then I decided against it. The main reason is 2 life to 5, I need to start taking some, or I'm just going to be too far behind. And with this approach, I can still take out Jinbei and then swing 6k at leader to at least bring him down to 4. And after that, I end my turn and clench my cheeks since I only have 1k counter in my hand. The good news is none of his characters have a base power of 5k, so he has to invest a lot of Dawn if he wants to threaten me with them. And so he starts with 2 into Charlotte Pudding, swinging 6k towards me. I can use leader ability and Ben Beckman to counter out of this, but is that a good play? I decide on yes, because I'm afraid if I don't do this, he's going to try and finish this game, attach the rest of his Dawn to his characters, and I have nothing to counter out. So I'd rather use this, deflect it, and make him think, you know what, I should develop my board instead. And next up comes the 7k swing from leader. Nothing we can do about this, but luckily he draws a Sengoku, which means he can't deploy another character. Good news for us. Bad news, another 10 cost Shanks. He then plays a Trafalgar Law and uses his ability to bounce the Perona back to his hand, allowing him to play her next turn. And now we've made it to our 10 Dawn curve, and we could play Shanks, but there's more we need to think about here. His -1000 power is nice, but with no blockers on the field and him taking up all 10 Dawn, next turn our opponent could just put everything into Trafalgar and Dofi and swing for game, so he's off the table. But with my 7 cost Newgate, I can play him down, KO the active Trafalgar, and give 1 Dawn to Yasop, allowing him to decrease Charlotte Pudding's power and ensure she gets KO'd as well. I decide this is the best option, as it allows me to KO both characters and also have some extra Dawn left over that I can use for a counter next turn. So I attack with Yasop, decrease her down to 3k, and get the KO. I only need 2 Dawn for my Gum Gum Red Hawk, so with my 1 extra I attach to leader and swing for a life. This brings up another tip. When going for life, you want to attack with your lower power characters first. This is because if you take a life, they'll add another card to their hand and have more resources to counter out the next attack. He decides to counter my 6k, so I swing with 8, activate Newgate's ability to trash the Trafalgar, and then I end my turn. To start his turn, he plays a Sengoku, allowing him to search the top 5 cards again, and he adds a Dracula Mihawk to his hand. He then plays a Perona, allowing him to organize the top 5 cards of his deck, so I can figure that there's probably a Warlord's card that's about to come out. While I'm down to 1 life, my board is starting to get very scary, so Dofi has a decision to make. He can try and finish off this game by going for life, or try and remove one of my characters and weaken my board. After some thinking, he settles on life, and swings 8k towards me. Now, if we try and think about what he was trying to do here, this makes sense, but unfortunately, the order that he did things was wrong. As you can see, he has 5 Dawn remaining, which means he could attach these to Martial D Teach and swing 8k as well. So even if I deflect 1 attack, I'm still going down to 0 life this turn. But he needed to attach some of this Dawn to Teach before attacking with Dofi in order to protect him from Red Hawk's second effect. And if he still wanted to play another character, what he could have done was use Teach's ability to grant himself 2 Rested Dawn, give him 1 active Dawn, and at 6k power, I can't KO him even if I use Shanks' ability to lower his power. And so here you see the maximum value of a Red Hawk, as not only does it negate his 8k swing, but it takes away his only other character that could attack this turn. And I think this catches him slightly off guard, but with 4 Dawn remaining, he plays a Trafalgar Law and bounces his Weevil and Perona back into his hand. Now it's my turn, and I need to make a decision. Can I win the game here and go for a full-out offensive attack, or do I need to keep playing it safe? Well, he has 3 life remaining, which means I need 4 hits to go through in order to win the game. And with 5 cards in his hand and 3 that would be added, I don't think that's enough just yet. And while I can take out this Trafalgar with my Newgate, if I drop down to 10 cost, I have no Dawn and no counters in my hand, which means he just needs 2 6k attacks and this game could be over. So I decide that I need 7 Dawn, 5 for my blocker and 2 for Gum Gum, and I'm going to spend the rest to take down some life. Now, I could have dropped my blocker first, but I want to keep as much Dawn active as I can, keeping my opponent on his toes and have him wondering what's he about to do next. Now, I have 9 Dawn remaining, and I know I only need 7, so I'm going to attach 2 to leader and swing another 7k hit. Now, Dofi makes the decision to counter out, but we still have our Silver's Rayleigh for another 8k swing afterwards. He decides this is too expensive to counter, and we take him down to 1 life. To finish our turn, we rest Newgate, KO Trafalgar, and bring down our 5-cost blocker. Now, our board is looking very strong, but this Dofi isn't done either, and the first thing he does is drop down to Jozu and bounce our blocker back to our hand. But with only 4 Dawn and only Dofi that can attack, we're not that concerned. He plays Boa, uses her effect to attach 1 Rested Dawn, and then swings 6k with his leader. Now, we could either use Gum Gum Red Hawk or leader ability plus our Silver's 1k counter to get out of this, but I decide not to. And the reason is the Gold D Roger in my hand. If I or my opponent is at 0 life and they activate a blocker while he's on the field, they lose the game. Paired that with my 6k power, 8k power, 8k power, and 5k leader, and I think I have what it takes to finish this off. You might be wondering why I started with Yasop, when I mentioned before that you want to go lowest to highest power when attacking at life. Well, I know a lot of Dofis run this card, which if triggered, can place a 5-cost or lower character to the bottom of their deck. This way, even if it is triggered, at least I got to attack with him first. And so I swing 6k, and he counters out with a 2k Mihawk. Next is my leader, and I know he's going to counter out of this, but it's still 1 more card from his hand. At this point, I know the game is mine, as he doesn't have enough cards in his hand to counter out from 2 8ks and a 13k hit. I think my opponent realizes this as well, as he evaluates his options before conceding the game. Now, as a new player watching this, there's a lot of concepts I talked about, and there's a lot to think about in each game. But the good news is, you don't need to think about all of them just yet. For now, just focus on the basics. What's your best thing to play this turn? Should you counter this attack? And should you attack a character or go after their leader? Don't set the bar too high for yourself just yet. Your goal isn't to play perfectly, it's just to start playing and start learning. And the best way you will do this is by making mistakes. You'll play against many different leaders and do things in the wrong order, focus the wrong target, forget to use one of your abilities. But from this, you'll know what to do differently next time. All of this will come to you, it just takes time. I hope you found this video helpful. It's a little different than the ones I've made before, and if you'd like to see some more gameplay commentary, either my own or perhaps a tournament game, let me know. Thanks for watching, I'll catch you next time.